So now that you've read the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock once through, I want to walk you through it a little bit more slowly, maybe break it into chunks for you to help you understand how the parts of the poem work together a little bit better before you take a look at those questions and try to find the answers for those. I'm not going to, explain the whole poem for you here. I just want to make it a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier for you to figure out what's going on. Before we move on, the first thing to note about this is that it's called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And there are two things to note about that title. One is that it's a love song. This isn't the kind of long love song you would ordinarily expect. What makes this different from a usual love song? Another thing is the name of the title character, who is in fact made up. There's no real live person named J. Alfred Prufrock, but what does that name make you think of? Like what kind of ideas might be associated with someone who would have that name? The other thing to notice is that it's by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot was one of the first modernist poets who started writing just before, just after the First World War, and they changed up a lot of what had come to be expected about poetry. They didn't use regular meter. They often didn't use rhyme. They often didn't use, specific line lengths, and they didn't tell a coherent story in many cases in the way, say, Ulysses, the poem by Tennyson we looked at did. So they changed a lot of things in this modernist movement. But they were trying to get at some of the things that people have been trying to get at with poetry for a long time. They're just using different ways to express it. So the first thing to look at is the epigraph to the poem, which is all in Italian, obviously. But as you saw when you looked at it on the website, it's from Dante. It's from the Inferno. And I'm not going to attempt to read to you the Italian here. I might be able to do a passable attempt, but, maybe not. But basically, this is from when Dante is visiting hell. These particular souls are trapped inside flames that quiver or vibrate when they talk. And so this particular person he's talking to says, "If I thought that I was replying to someone who would ever return to the world, this flame would cease to flicker. But since no one ever returns from these depths alive, if what I've heard is true, I will answer you without fear of infamy or shame." So what you want to think about is, how does this notion of speaking because no one will ever hear, what does that have to do with this poem? Who might Prufrock be? Is he the one who's speaking, or is he the Dante who's listening? Those are things that can kind of be, you can be asking yourself as you read the poem. So this is the first section of the poem. This is basically an invitation to someone, this I, the you and I that are going, but it's not clear it's not made it clear in the poem who this person is, so that's something that's left up to you to imagine. But it's an invitation to go out into the city and in essence pay an afternoon call. "Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit." So this wraps up nicely with a "let us go" at the beginning and at the end. And it's the first introduction of this notion of an overwhelming question that Prufrock is going to come back to. Then we have our first instance of what's sort of like a refrain. "In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo." What would you imagine these women are like? Why would they be talking of Michelangelo? And what do you think, how does that fit in with the invitation to make a visit that he just said? So these two stanzas describe the walk through the city on the way to the visit. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you, and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. So in these two stanzas, in the first one is obviously a very striking image of what it looks like in the city on this particular afternoon. The second one diverges pretty sharply from that physical description of the fog and the smoke of this city evening. And Prufrock really turns inward. And what you want to look at here is what is he thinking? What is he worried about as he heads towards this visit? And in the context of what he's thinking and what he's worried about, this refrain comes back. How has it changed now that you've read those two stanzas on the way to the visit? Does their talking of Michelangelo mean something a little different now that it's come around a second time? So in this stanza, he finally arrives and walks up to the door of this particular house. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. You notice that in this section, we're starting to get a lot of repetitions. A lot of the same ideas keep coming back. Those are ideas you're going to want to pay attention to and think about as to why they're so important to Prufrock and why he keeps coming back to them. So these three stanzas are sort of like a description of the afternoon visit as he is experiencing it. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight, downed with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table, or wrap about a shawl. And should I then presume? And how should I begin? So in this section, when he's talking about the afternoon visit, pay attention to how he feels and how he is made to feel that way by the others who are there. So this is a version of that question again that he talked about at the beginning, an overwhelming question. Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves, leaning out of windows? He abandons this version pretty quickly. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. This image is just sort of marooned, alone, by itself. What makes this image striking, and what might have made Prufrock feel this way? After this sort of interlude, we come back to the question that he's trying to ask. And would it have been worth it, after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me? Would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it toward some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all? If one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. And would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile? After the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this, and so much more, it is impossible to say just what I mean. But as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl, and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. Notice what he's afraid of in the answer to the question, and see if you can recognize that fear in anything you might have experienced. And so here's the explanation of why he does not end up asking his question. And the afternoon, the evening, sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, for it lingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker. And in short, I was afraid. So at this point, Prufrock shifts away from this issue of an overwhelming question to ask himself, who am I? What kind of person am I? Obviously, he's already compared himself to Lazarus, come back from the dead. Now, in this section, he's going to have a different comparison. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I'm an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse at times, indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. So if you've read much Shakespeare, you might be able to identify the kind of character that Prufrock is comparing himself to here. It might also help you understand what Prufrock thinks of himself to look at this passage. And this, as we near the end of the poem, sort of sums up Prufrock's feelings of uselessness and growing old and perhaps out of touch. I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. This last section is probably the weirdest in the whole poem, but it's an image of mermaids. And if you apply to this maybe some of the strategies we've used for figuring out symbols, you might be able to make a little bit of headway with these mermaids when you think of what mermaids traditionally do and how they function as a symbol or an image. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back, when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed, red and brown, till human voices wake us and we drown. So that's it. Now go ahead and take a look at those questions I asked you and do the best you can and come in with the best answers you have next week.